how did you find out that the victim was leaving town the following day?
I can't remember that good.
Was it from a blog?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading.
It's not leading, Your Honor. Was it from a blog?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what blog was that?
The blonde was Wendi.
No.
Do you want the culpable parties held accountable for murdering the father of your children?
Absolutely. I'm grateful they're already in jail.
But not if it's your family.
It's not my family.
I mean, somebody hired them, right?
Not necessarily.
Somebody paid them.
I learned something this morning.
Yeah, me too. You didn't want them held accountable if it was your family members. Didn't you tell law enforcement that?
That's not what I told law enforcement.
What did you tell law enforcement?
I told them that the person who did this should be held responsible and that I had nothing to do with it.
Page 122, lines 7 through 12. If somebody tried to kill my ex-husband, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The investigator says regardless of who it is, and your answer is, I mean, it would be different if I thought it were my brother.
But I don't think it was my family, is what I said.
Different now, isn't it?
No, it's not different. That's exactly
different
what I
today,
said
isn't
right
it?
here. No, that's not
No
right.
further questions.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everyone? Happy Valentine's Day. I hope everyone's having a good day. This is a kind of a weird day for me in that 12 years ago today, I should have been, I was almost declared dead in a fire. I narrowly survived a fire. So I want to dedicate this episode to the wonderful people at the Weill Cornell burn unit who saved my life. That's a pretty light way to start off an episode, isn't it? Just a light conversation about near death. On another note, I want to thank everybody who just subscribed to my Patreon. Renee, Chavez, Angela Smith, Melba, Miss Lisa. You didn't have to do that for upping her subscription. Julia, K. Thomas, Riverdale Pilates, and JS. Thank you so much. New episode on Patreon now, and it's about Wendy's bizarre podcast that she released in 2015, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe even, hope that's right. Just off the top of my head. Pretty happy with the way it turned out. A lot of odd things in that podcast to talk about. But today we are talking about Wendi Fanci Fiction. On her channel, she released a bizarre interview, very strange, from 2012 when Wendi was promoting her book. And we will get into it. It's not long, but it is packed with odd, ironic stuff in retrospect. But before we do that, let's look at your comments. So last time we were talking about, of course, wait, hold on one second. The whole issue with the kosher. I had a Super Bowl party and had kosher guests. And I hope I got my point across. My point was that kosher is much more involved than just providing a type of food, and it really puts a strain on a marriage if both parties aren't fully on board with it. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of dedication to keep kosher. And I can see how it would cause problems. My thought is that Wendi thought because she had broken up with Dan Markel before and gotten back together with him, that he'd want to keep her as a wife so much that he would forget his desire, or he would give it up, his desire to keep kosher. But as we know, he became more and more devout in his Judaism as the marriage went on. Becky Boo says, 1433 says, I wonder if Dan ever thought they were capable of this, meaning the Adelson family, like even a fleeting thought. I think the supervised visitation filing was the tipping point. I think that is part of it. I think also the threatening of Wendy's law license, even if she was only admonished, she really can't take that kind of public humiliation. I think Jeff Lacasse put it the best way when he said the worst thing you can do to Wendi is point out that she's not perfect. That kind of public defiling of Wendy's image, I think, would have been really difficult for her. And it could have gone further. Court could have taken away her law license. That was definitely in the realm of possibilities. So I agree with you. I don't think Donna can take that kind of blow to her image either. I think they're very alike in that way, Wendi and Donna. Sally A, 6944 says, the stunt at the wedding was not about kosher food. It was about Donna and Wendi inserting their dominance over Dan. They were showing him who was going to be the boss from the very beginning. It was a power move. I agree with you totally. That's what I've always said. It was the challenge thrown out from the beginning. This is the way it's going to be. Get on board or not, or be an outsider. Donna's emails are very interesting. There's a lot of references to Wendi being an outsider if she does not interrupt or disturb what she thought of as Dan's dangerous and religious zealotry and his influence over the children. You'll be an outsider. There's one portion where she's talking about if the kids continue to have this emphasis on their Judaism, all they'll want to talk about is shul, 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 and you'll be an outsider, Wendi. Which is pretty interesting language, and I think everyone but the Adelson family is an outsider to the Adelson family. They're so cult-like in the way that they operate. Margie Miranda, 6785 says, Roberta, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't change the podcast name. Love your work. Thank you. You get banana bread. Well, thank you for the banana bread, Margie. I don't think my podcast name was ever on the table. I think Miss Lisa, one of my wonderful moderators, suggested that the audience refer to themselves as the Glass House. Excuse me. Wow, it sounded like I was going through puberty there for a second. Or through the looking glass, something like that. But I don't think I will ever change my name of my podcast. But thank you. And thank you for the kind words. So let us get into Wendy's. Are you guys ready for this? And she looks so different. She's so young and she's so thin here. She looks very, very different. Let's check it out. And I want to thank Murder by Maestro for helping me clean the audio and censor some YouTube unfriendly words in here. Thank you for doing that, Murder by Maestro.
Shari, thank you so much. Well, human trafficking is a widespread issue going on right here in our backyard. We have with us this morning clinical professor at Florida State University's College of Law, Wendi Adelson, with a book, and hear more to discuss about human trafficking. And again, like we said, just it's a widespread issue that it's hard to believe it is happening right here in the United States. Welcome, Wendi.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. So before we
So these are Fanci Fiction's touches, book credit. So she writes book cover, photo credit, Harvey Adelson. So Harvey Adelson took the photograph for the book cover. That's Wendi Adelson, and her eye Photoshop to make it look even bluer. It's really interesting. Her pride in her blue eyes. We know that she wears contacts to exaggerate the blueness, but some people claim she was born with brown eyes. I don't know. Her brother has blue eyes. I don't know what I don't know what the truth is there. She certainly wants them as blue as possible.
Get into it and get into your book, how is it that these women get here to the United States, and why the United States?
Sure. Human trafficking is a problem that happens all over the world. And oftentimes people think it's just people who come from other countries. But actually victims of trafficking are sometimes born in the U.S. Or have legal status in the U.S. So it's people coming in as well as people who are born here. And we're talking about trafficking as well as labor trafficking. So domestic servitude, agricultural industry, as well as the commercial industry, which seems to get the bulk of the press.
So you're saying maybe someone who's a housekeeper.
Sure.
And she could be being abused right there under the roof of the person that she's working for.
It's very, very possible.
Okay.
Right. So it's exploitative labor conditions, whether it happens through force, fraud, or coercion.
Okay. And I was reading some statistics. 17 to 25,000 women are brought into the United States every year and used as slaves. It seems, I mean, is that an accurate number?
I mean, as far as I know, it does seem possible. We are seeing a large amount of cases, but it's the type of thing that's really hidden in plain sight. Mm-hmm. So people want statistics, and they want statistics for good reason, but it's very hard to know in truth how big the problem is.
Let's talk a little bit.
Right. So there are a lot of statistics. I wonder if she just couldn't pull up statistics off the top of her head, because the government's been keeping statistics on this kind of stuff. But of course, I'm looking in 2024. I don't know when this was done, if they did have all these statistics. I would think so. I would think there would be statistics on this. So she's like, people want statistics. And yes, it's hard to know. But wouldn't the statistics give us some idea of how big it is? I don't know. I just find that very odd that she's saying, oh, forget all those statistics. Forget all the study done on this subject. Hard to know. Odd. I don't know. I find that hard to believe that those wouldn't be some kind of a guide.
A bit more about your book. You're an immigration lawyer, so you deal with women like this all the time. What do you want people to get from your book? What do you want them to understand?
Sure. I want them to see the human side, the human face behind this issue of human trafficking. I want them to understand that these are people who are vulnerable, and that's what leads them to be trafficked, and that they are people who are capable of great courage and great joy. There's a lot of humor built into the book. It's not an altogether dark book. It really exposes the fact that these are human beings. These are individuals, and they.
So I've covered two cases, two trials from the courtroom where trafficking was a charge. And those witnesses, I'll never forget. I would never think of smiling talking about them. I find this so strange that she's talking about these clients that she worked with, and she's smiling and she's talking about wanting to bring in humor in their story. So I'm thinking about NXIVM victims, Larry Ray's victims, and I would never think of smiling in any of those cases. I don't know if this is nerves being on TV. So this is local Miami TV. This is their NBC affiliate. What's going on here? It gets even weirder. Check it out.
Come here seeking a better life, and they are duped into an experience that's far beyond what they would have imagined.
That's interesting.
They're duped into an experience far beyond what they would have imagined. Far beyond what they would have imagined. Doesn't that sound like she's about to describe something amazing? It was way beyond their wildest dreams and wildest expectations. Though that phrase for me is always associated with something great, unexpectedly wonderful, not something traumatic and horrible and life-altering and wounding. What is she talking about here? Way beyond their wildest what they could ever dream about, and smiling through it. And I wonder what the interviewer was thinking. She must have been like, wow, this is unusual. We don't get too many of these kind of interviews. So incongruent, the attitude and the air, so incongruent with the subject matter.
You said that the book has some humor to it because it just seems like such a serious issue.
It is a very serious issue. I don't mean to make light of it, but I included the character of their attorney who tries to...
So the interviewer's like, what? We don't usually associate humor and your odd demeanor with this subject matter. And Wendi backtracks and says, well, I'm not making light of it, but I want everyone to buy my book and let them know it's not a downer. This is a kind of uplifting trafficking book that you've all been waiting for. It's like, aren't you sick of these downer books on this subject matter? Doesn't everyone want to read an uplifting book on this subject? Isn't that what you think of when you think of this subject?
Who tries to help them through the process of their criminal trials and their immigration legal experience, and really tries to help them move on. It's an experience that really breaks their spirits. And the book doesn't end right when they're discovered, right when their experience of trafficking ends. The book continues on to show them trying to leave.
See, because she also put in the experience of the lawyer. Remember the lawyer Lily in this? That's not based on herself. Remember her testimony? It's based on a friend of hers, but she was sure to put in that character because she wants everybody to know that character can bring humor and levity into the subject matter. Thanks, Tommy DV. Thanks so much for the super sticker. I appreciate it. I mean, jaw-dropping. This one is this one will, I think, will become a meme, this interview. It's so crazy.
Normal lives in the United States and trying to move forward.
Because for many of these women, even though they are free from these traffickers, they still live with this sense of fear, because
Absolutely.
One of the reasons, and I'm assuming here, and please correct me, is if they leave, if they run away from these men that are holding them, they can possibly hurt their families,
Absolutely.
kill their families.
Sure.
So they always live with this fear.
Mm-hmm. They aren't necessarily physical chains, but there's a large amount of psychological coercion that goes into convincing people that they will harm their families. There's a large amount of psychological coercion that goes into convincing people that they will harm their families if.
So So Fanci Fiction is making a parallel between the ways that these traffickers work, or that Wendy's describing the way that these traffickers work, the way in which these traffickers work, and Charlie Adelson's defense of extortion and how similar it is. Very interesting parallel she just made there. Very effective too. So if you missed it in the beginning, also Fanci Fiction brings up this idea that isn't it odd that Wendy's working in this area with exploited women, and knowing her brother Charlie takes tourism trips to prey on girls that can't consent. So it's happening in her own family and she's not calling it out. So it reminds me of her testimony. It would be different that I played in the beginning of this episode. It would be different if it were, didn't you say it would be different if it were your family? But when it is her family, throw a blind eye on it. In this case, with this issue, something she could really put a stop to, you would hope, or at least distance herself from her brother. But no, they're very close.
They try to leave, and that keeps people in servitude.
Now, there's some laws in place to try and shut down human trafficking, but there's something that also we as citizens can do. You said that there are some places we may drive by and it could be going on behind those doors and we may not even know it.
Sure.
It's kind of like hidden places. What should we be keeping an eye out for?
That's a great question in terms of what are indicators of human trafficking that you might see. I mean, anytime you see a situation where you feel like someone is being victimized in some way, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, there are hotlines. The Department of Children and Families has a hotline that you can call if you see something that looks a little bit suspicious. If you see a young girl, maybe from the same or a different ethnic group, taking a shower outside, if you see a young...
So outside showers. Okay, check.
Person in the neighborhood that doesn't seem to be attending school, that seems to be in the home.
How young are some of these?
So someone not attending school, or an outdoor shower. Those are the two examples she gets. And this is partly to be fair, this is partly the interviewer's fault, or really the interviewer's fault for interrupting Wendy. But I wanted to hear more examples of what to look for, because this is probably the more helpful part of the interview, where she's not promoting her book and she's showing off her expertise. But we have outdoor showers and someone not going to school. I wish she would have continued.
These women or girls?
I mean, they could be as young as 5, 6, 7. If we're talking about individuals serving as domestic servants in homes.
Wow.
People working in the agricultural industry. I mean, there are so many industries, especially in Florida. Florida is actually the 3rd worst state for human trafficking.
Wow. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for coming in and talking about this issue with us. And you can find Wendy's book, This Is Our Story, in bookstores, as well as on Amazon.
Okay, so that is that odd piece of tape from back in the day. And am I the only one who thinks she looks totally different? Americana Memories. Thank you so much. I appreciate it for the super chat. I think she looks totally different. And I don't know if some of that it just seems, and I would love to know, it seems more than just aging. Not a criticism, but just an observation. Very different looking. It's Miss Lisa. Thank you so much. Love your shorts. Keep them coming. If you're not subscribed to It's Miss Lisa's channel, you're missing out. She's making great shorts on this case. So I'm going to take a quick break. When we get back, more on Wendi Adelson's work in this area. Don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay, so Murder by Maestro on his channel, he explored some of Wendi's work in this area. In his video, Wendi Adelson, The Year of the Murder. And he edited down a little bit on her work. But what she really did was get witnesses ready for testimony in these cases, make sure that they had immunity. So it makes it doubly crazy. So Wendi is not only a lawyer, but a lawyer who worked in this area of immunity to testify that she didn't know what immunity meant or what it brought or her own immunity in the cases in which she was testifying in Dan Markel's murder. So in this, she's talking about her work. This is someone who, I believe his name is Melchior, who got caught when when Wendi would have been very young, but took a little while to prosecute. And it's her work with these trafficked women.
You're seeing. Keep your eyes open to know what you're seeing.
You came here because you were subpoenaed and had no choice.
The defense attorney would never allow the client to take the stand, so that the prosecutor was going to have to build the case entirely without any kind of testimony from the accused perpetrator.
This is not fun. I would not do this by choice.
Congress created that specifically to take care of these young trafficking victims.
Working with prosecutors and helping them understand.
We responded to a residential area near Remondale and Capitol Circle, which at first I didn't want to ask any questions. It's very obvious that they've been traumatized. The body language told me clearly they had been through a lot. So this took place almost 13 hours. She had me give them, each girl, a piece of paper when they wanted to cooperate. And I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, since you can't tell me too much about this house, can you at least draw an idea of where the house might be and then give me an idea? And
So Murder by Maestro is making the point, for those of you who are listening on podcast, that Wendi Adelson would have been familiar with the police questioning from working with these women and very familiar with the process. And she'd be familiar with the process anyway, being a lawyer, but I think his point is that she would have been intimate with the process from working with these women.
And therefore, when you start driving the neighborhood, you're like, oh, there's a cul-de-sac coming up. Let's see if she points that house out. It sure as anything. As soon as we start getting close, she goes, that's the house.
The victims were taken to the Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, where they were actually treated as victims. And it was the absolute right thing to do. That's when I got the call, was to actually go out to Tallahassee Memorial Hospital along with the Tallahassee police officers when the case was first identified.
There were a number of us that were working to help represent some of the victims, but it meant all kinds of things.
We decided that we were going to assist with the legal aspect of it, but at the same time, letting the clients know that we were here to assist on anything else that they needed, which at that point was to contact family members. They also wanted to go to church. So we took them to church. The victims just needed some security. They were afraid that their traffickers were going to find them. So we were very fortunate actually to have a safe place to keep them here in Tallahassee.
A lot of the work that we did was really hearing their stories and figuring out how to apply for T visas.
A trafficking visa. Congress created that specifically to take care of these young trafficking victims.
Working with prosecutors and helping them understand what trafficking is and what it meant.
We met with them on several occasions and went over their testimony, attempted to keep them at ease and to prepare them for what is going to be a very trying experience. Mr. Melchor himself, we charged him with a conspiracy count, and it was actually an 8-count indictment is what he was charged with. He had a defense that yes, he was involved in prostitution, but had no knowledge about where the victims, the women, were coming from, why they were being held, or that they were being held, that they were having to pay back monies and you know, for the transportation and things of that nature.
The defendant would never take the stand, and the defense attorney would never allow the client to take the stand, so that the prosecutor was going to have to build the case entirely without any kind of testimony from the accused perpetrator.
I began with putting on the several witnesses that we had in the case.
Not taking the stand. Who does that sound like? The Adelson family, right? So they have said that they will take the fifth. And when I say they, I mean Harvey, Donna, and Wendi have all said they'll take the fifth if they were ever brought in as a witness. And that's how Wendi got her limited use immunity deal. But Harvey and Donna were both on the witness list in Charlie's trial. And they said the same thing, and there was to be no mention. It was agreed on both sides that they would take the fifth should they have been forced to testify in that trial. So kind of pretty, of course, it's not supposed to be a sign of guilt, but it makes me raise an eyebrow with everything else I know about this case.
The young women came in on day 2 of the trial.
In a criminal case, you have to have live testimony from the witnesses. And they had to do it in the courtroom with Melchor, Mr. Melchor, sitting there watching. And again, that was just a lot of bravery shown on their part. And I think that more than anything else was the strength of this case. What we learned after going after Mr. Melchor is that was just sort of the popping open the lid. There was a much larger organization that Melchor was just a piece of or a lower member of.
This was operating in half a dozen different cities, that it stretched up into Atlanta, that of course there were Texas and we think California connections. It was organized crime at its best.
Eventually, Mr. Melchor decided to cooperate with the government, and he did before his sentencing, and provided information about Mr. Monsalve and the organization. The Monsalve organization, including Mr. Monsalve himself, pled guilty.
Reflecting on the case, I still feel like the punishment isn't enough for what our clients have been through.
Rescue is not one moment in time. That the FBI...
Isn't that interesting that she says the punishment should be greater for what her clients have been through? So she's very empathetic towards the victims that she works with, but not at all towards her ex-husband's family. And really, I would even stretch it even further to her own children. I would say if she really even cared about her own children's well-being, she would have never changed their name. It's taking something away from them that's really precious, and she should know that. So we're seeing empathy here, or surface level empathy. I think she's saying it because she thinks it makes her look good. I don't think she's capable. This is my take on Wendi, capable of real empathy towards other human beings. So that's why I think we get these weird incongruent attitude to the subject matter that she's talking about in that interview. And what's interesting, in the episode I just dropped on Patreon about Wendi's podcast, what Wendi wants the world to know is that she really is going through a terrible time after her ex-husband's murder. It's just that she has a terrible habit of smiling inappropriately and having inappropriate reactions to terrible things. And she talks about her friend's father dying, and when she heard the news, she smiled. So it's a big explaining. It's not that you might think that my lack of sadness around my ex-husband's murder, or my lack of mourning, or my odd behavior is telling or sus. It's just my quirk. It's just a quirk, guys.
Or police may be able to rescue them from that brothel, and that's vitally important. But the idea being that, that's just the beginning of the real rescue that they actually have to ultimately experience.
As a welcome, actually, to Tallahassee and an introduction, I guess, to American culture, the mom actually picked Golden Corral to take the kids that evening. And of course, they had a good bit share of sugar.
It tends to really stabilize both the mother and the child to be reunited.
My concern is what we can do and how we can do it for them to actually overcome this horrible experience. So from the very beginning, give them the power.
We continue even now, 8 years later, to do the victim care for those victims.
So for this particular case, community involvement was a major, major part.
From the federal side, U.S. attorneys have been congressionally mandated to address human trafficking and to build human trafficking task forces.
To focus on intervening on the buying aspect of the buying and selling of sex and prostitution and trafficking.
It seems small to maybe write a letter to your congressman, but if everyone, all their constituents are writing letters, then this is letting Washington know that this is something important.
They'll have mouths to talk with, and even hands to write with, and computers to type with. I mean, we all have ways that we can build relationships with people and tell them about this. You never know who you'll tell that'll spark enough of an interest to brew up a whole new passion for it.
Focusing on awareness and education, I think that that is the only way that we can actually combat this kind of crime.
Keep your eyes open to know what you're seeing, know who to talk to about it, not to agree to live in a world where some people are just thought of as less than human, to never treat someone that way and never allow other people to treat someone that way.
So Murder by Maestro is cleverly editing in a picture of Dan Markel when Wendi's saying that keep your eyes wide open and that victims should be treated well. And he's putting up a picture of Dan Markel. Obviously, the Markel family has not been treated well by the Adelson family. They've been denied visitation with her grandchildren. Really kept out of their lives. The Markel name has been taken away from the children. Really any interaction with his side of the family. So strangers, she's going to have a lot of empathy, public empathy for, but no public empathy for her own family.
I think the public
or ex-family, I would say, right? Ex-extended family.
most needs to understand what we learned here at the Human Rights Center is that you don't need to look to distant corners of the world for human rights violations, that they happen right here in our own backyard, right here in Florida, right here in Tallahassee, right here in the United States.
So thank you, Murder by Maestro. If you're not subscribed to his channel, the link is always in the description of my episodes, the material that I show each episode. That Jewy Jesus chick, welcome aboard. You are now a member of the Roberta Glass community. Welcome. Slice of banana bread for you. Dean Walker, thanks so much for the super sticker. And Shari Davis, thank you for the super sticker. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, that is what I have for today. And thank you so much, Fanci Fiction, for putting that up on your channel. Pretty interesting stuff. Just going to end the show the way I usually do. This is with a victim impact letter. This was written September 17th, 2019, to the Honorable James C. Hankinson. I have known Danny since the mid-90s when it became clear that his sister and my brother were destined to be married. Though Danny and I lived in different cities, he and his boys were an important part of my life. We celebrated Shabbat dinners, Passover seders, and major family milestones together. Both being frequent Facebook users, we always knew what was going on in each other's lives, and it was very clear how much Danny cared about his family and friends. Of course, his love for his boys knew no bounds. I miss Danny's bambizzle birthday greetings. I miss sharing the pride we both felt in the accomplishments of our nieces and nephews. It pains me that our nieces and nephews lost not only their beloved Uncle Bo, but the ability to see, play, and dote on Danny's boys. Where once I knew that Danny would make sure my life was on track by asking the deep and sometimes hard questions that few others dare to ask, there is now a void in my life. I miss his inquisitiveness, his inquisitive and playful nature, and I miss his passion and compassion. Phantom faces at the window, phantom shadows at the door, empty chairs at empty tables where my friends will meet no more. Les Mis. What has been hardest is the pervading sadness that now permeates the Markel family. A close-knit, loving family has been grievously wounded. What has been stolen and can never be replaced is the ability to have moments of complete, full, and untainted joy. Now, no family gathering is ever complete. Smiles are a bit forced, and the sadness and stress are palpable. Danny is missing, and the family portrait is forever cracked, as are our hearts. Sincerely, Andrea Friedman. Shari Davis, how was your Super Bowl party? It was great, Shari. It was a lot of fun. It was a great game. And I learned a lot about kosher guests and serving kosher food. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for asking. Hopefully you'll do it again the next year. All right. Well, that is what I have for today, guys. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening.